Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Graphic Thoughts Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Panel, and today's episode will be a bonus episode. Obviously, this is your guys' apology for episodes being late the last couple weeks. A lot of stuff has been going on, but we will be back on track going forward. This bonus episode is not the Tarzan one that I've been telling you about. That'll be coming out later. That one was just for fun. That wasn't an apology for anything. But this one is an apology for episodes being late. This is on FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST, the books 4, 5, and 6. I absolutely cannot wait to get into this. Going forward, the next probably 2 to 3 weeks of Fridays will be FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST, continuing on from this. So excited to get into that. That is absolutely my favorite manga. It beat Dragon Ball Z by a very, very close margin, but it is absolutely my favorite manga. The characters in it, the story, absolutely perfect. But yeah, let's get right into this. I am so excited. Like I said, this is going to be a bonus episode. This isn't blocking any, getting in the way of another episode or anything like that. You will still be getting the comic episode. You will still be getting the Bleach episode that I should be posted right before this episode gets posted. And this Friday coming up, you will be getting another episode. So don't worry, you're not losing out on content. You are gaining a whole bunch of content. So let's get right into this bonus episode breakdown of books 4, 5, and 6 of the FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST. Alrighty. We will be jumping right into volume 4 of FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST. This volume mainly includes the Laboratory 5 arc, continuation, and climax, the introduction of main villains like Envy and Lust, and then bigger hints about the truth behind the Philosopher's Stone. Obviously, we found out in the last episode that the Philosopher's Stone is able to kind of break the rules of equivalent exchange that alchemy runs on, which obviously is kind of a big deal. We start with scene 1. Edward Elric is inside Lab 5, fighting one of the armored guards. The guard reveals that he is a soul bound to armor, just like Alphonse Elric. The guard tries to mentally break Ed by saying that Ale might be fake, claiming his memories can be manipulated. This plants doubt that will explode later within Ed. This is important, obviously, for a couple of different reasons. For one, this is the first time that we've come across us, the readers, for the story, and then in the story, at least that we know, the first time that they've come across another person that has been bonded to a suit of armor like that. And then for 2, obviously, Ed doesn't really necessarily know all the ins and outs and inner workings of everything that happened to bond Alphonse to the suit of armor. So the idea that some of his memories and or the things that he thinks might not be necessarily real, they might have just been implanted just by the things that have been said to him and or experiences shaping him, is kind of an interesting thing to think about. The second guard confronts Alphonse, tells him you're not real, your memories were created by Ed. This leads Ale to start questioning his existence and his identity. Obviously, once again, like I just said, they don't really know the inner workings of Ale being bonded to the armor. They don't know everything about it, and Ale even knows even less than Ed does. Obviously, Ed's the one that did it, so very much doesn't really know. I mean, it's very possible that all of the stuff that he thinks he knows has come from the mind of Ed, kind of transferred to him. It's a very possible thing, and it's a very likely thing compared if you kind of just think about the fact that Alphonse was gone and then came back. How do you know that when he left, he was able to take anything back? So, this is one of the most important emotional moments so far. Probably one of the most emotional moments in the story, but I think it's definitely the most emotional moment so far. That kind of is the first time Ale starts to question, and that is a big thing throughout the book, Ale questioning kind of his self-worth and or just himself in general. And this is the first time in the first instance that we see of that, so this leads us to the end of the fight. Ed refuses to break mentally. He uses strategy plus alchemy to defeat the armored opponent. This leads us to a reveal that the guards are former humans who were turned into experimental subjects, experimental weapons, if you will. It's not a similar kind of thing where Alphonse needed to be put in the suit of armor. These guys didn't need to be put in the suit of armor. They were just put here for whatever reason that we will hopefully figure out later. We find out the truth about Laboratory 5. Laboratory 5 is used for creating the Philosopher's Stone using human lives. Prisoners are brought in and used as raw material to create the Philosopher's Stone. This confirms that the stone is equal to human sacrifice. This is without a doubt the biggest, reveal of the book so far. Obviously they've been hinting at what the Philosopher's Stone could do and or could be for this entire book, but this is kind of where we start to figure out what it is and what's kind of going on with it. And obviously what we find out the darkness and the dark twisted backstory and everything that's going on with it. And the fact that they literally use fucking human sacrifices basically to create these things. That is fucking insane. Definitely brings this book into a darker corner. This leads us to Al's identity crisis. Outside of the laboratory, Al confronts Ed, asks, "What if my memories are not real?" This is a very much an emotional clash. Ed is furious and hurt that Al would even ask him that. Would be able to question him on something like that. And then Al is scared and confused. Obviously, he doesn't really know. This was put into his head, and he's very young, and he's very, very unexperienced in all of this. So he's very, very scared. Obviously, he's even younger than Ed, and Ed's really young himself. So this is very much a breaking point in their relationship. Kind of the first crack in the armor, if you will. One of the guards is Barry the Chopper. It is. Barry the Chopper is, in my opinion, the coolest fucking name in this manga. One of the coolest names in manga. Barry the Chopper is such a fucking badass name. It's like a really silly badass name. Like, it's because it's Barry, and I think Barry's a really silly name. But Barry the Chopper is the silliest badass name I've ever heard in my entire life. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. But we learned that Barry the Chopper was a serial killer whose soul was bound to the armor. He absolutely loves killing. He becomes a recurring creepy presence later throughout the story. He becomes almost a sidekick, if you will, to our main characters. He's a nice little character. You get a couple laughs out of him. He's pretty entertaining. He doesn't become really too big or important. We do find out a couple more things because of him, but that's really about it. That's kind of the biggest sacrifice he makes to this book right here. This leads us to scene 7, Lab 5 getting destroyed. Military forces move in. The lab is blown up. This is obviously important because all of the evidence of everything that was taking place there gets erased. The truth gets buried. Someone powerful is obviously covering this up. That's kind of what all this shows. If someone has the capability of destroying the entire place, that takes a lot. So it kind of sets up that there could be a bigger bad that this all could be leading to in the future. This leads us to scene 8, which is the introduction of the homunculi, the first major appearance of lust and envy. They are, obviously, if you don't get from the names, lust, envy, 2 of the 7 deadly sins. Let me try not to look this up here. Lust, envy, greed. Nah, that's all I'm going to get. Let me look this up real quick. Alright, I had 3 of them. Lust, greed, and envy. It is pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust. Gluttony is my favorite. I should have gotten gluttony. It's late, okay? And then sloth. I never would have got sloth. Pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. Sloth does not sound right at all. I've never... Obviously, you kind of see where this is going. In FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST, the homunculi were given the names of the 7 deadly sins: lust, envy, gluttony, greed, wrath, sloth, pride. Each one represents their sin in personality and powers. The homunculi don't very much do anything when they first introduce. They kind of just observe events and manipulate from the shadows. They are calm and in control. They are way more dangerous than anything before that we've seen. Lust demonstrates her abilities by extending fingers into deadly blades. The tone very much kind of shifts here. This isn't science at all anymore. This is something unnatural and terrifying. This is very much a monster. this leads us to scene 10. It's revealed that the military may be involved. Lab 5 wasn't isolated. This expands the story from two brothers searching for answers to a massive hidden conspiracy. Not a small thing to say that the story gets a lot bigger now. Obviously, like I just said, it's not just these two brothers trying to figure out how they can get their bodies back anymore. It's these two brothers trying to figure out how they can get their bodies back anymore, along with the entire world's military, or the entire place's military falling apart behind them, it seems. Or possibly. But this leads us to scene 11. Mustang, obviously Colonel Mustang, in the military. Roy Mustang starts investigating, questioning orders. He begins moving into a bigger role. Kind of the first time we see anything of this nature. Military people questioning the military, other than that, obviously. This leads us to scene 12. This is where Ed and Al reconcile. Obviously, a couple scenes ago, they ended up kind of having a bit of a fallout, a bit of a crack in the armor, but Ed reassures Al his soul is real, their bond is real. All the memories and everything that Ed had, or Al has, is Al's. It's nothing that Ed's put in his head or done to him. It's all Al. And this is kind of a big moment. Al choosing to believe Ed. He doesn't decide to question him or push any forward. He decides to believe him straight up on his word. This restores their connection, but the doubt leaves a scar. They both very much are not going to forget about this experience. They're just going to kind of go on with their lives as brothers and as best friends. But it's nothing that either one of these two are ever going to 1000% get over. And that's one of those things that very much connects back to life. A lot of things people do to you, you don't necessarily you don't, end the relationship and or you don't stop communicating with that person, but a lot of these things leave little scars. You can forgive the person, but you're not going to forget the person or forget what they did. And a lot of the times there's only so many scars you can take until frankly your skin doesn't look like skin anymore and you're kind of just nothing's left. And that's why you gotta get out. Sometimes getting out isn't the easy thing to do, or even necessarily the best thing to do for you at the time. Might not even be the best thing for you in the long run. But you can't ever let somebody make you somebody that you're not. And you can't ever let somebody damage you. The world's gonna damage you enough without you allowing people to put on more damage. But this leads us to scene 13. Ed now understands that the Philosopher's Stone requires human lives. Obviously, this makes his goal very much morally complicated. He refuses to use it in that way, but we don't know really how it even works. Maybe that's the only way it can be used. So, this leads us to the final scene of Book 4, A Quiet Little Aftermath. 5 is gone. The truth is hidden. The brothers move forward, but now they know the world is much darker than they thought. There's not really any going back after this. You can only kind of try your best and hardest to move forward the best you can, the best of your ability, but this volume is very important for a couple of reasons. It's very much where FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST becomes less about adventure and more about the dark and philosophical tragedies that have happened in this world and then that are happening currently and or are going to continue to happen. It introduces the cost of alchemy. It introduces some of the main villains, and then it introduces just a larger conspiracy in all, with the military possibly being involved with the lab and maybe the homunculi and anything else that we were introduced to in this story. So book 4 was really, really important. Leads directly into book 5 mainly. So let's jump right into that. Super excited here. Volume 5 covers the Lab 5 aftermath, emotional plus the politics, the rising tension with Scar, kind of our main introduction to Scar. I mean, we saw him earlier, but this is the big introduction of him. The introduction of Ling Yo, and then the deeper hints about the homunculi's plan. Scene 1 opens with Edward and Alphonse Elric recovering physically and mentally from the events of Book 4 and previous events. They now fully understand Philosopher's Stones equals human lives. Both are shaken, especially Al. The tone is very heavy, reflective, quieter than previous volumes. They're very much not joking, not outgoing, not anything of that nature. They are very somber, not sad, but broken down to the bone. This leads us directly into scene 2. The lingering doubt in Ail's identity. This is very much a big thing for the first couple volumes, or the first couple issues. Alphonse still struggles eternally after Lab 5. The idea that his memories could be fake hasn't fully gone away. Obviously, he chose to believe Ed when Ed told him that they were, but it's still a lingering thing in the back of his head. Ed reassures him again, but the doubt still lingers beneath the surface. This kind of puts into the idea into your mind that their bond is obviously strong, but not so much unshakable anymore. The idea that all of this could just be something that was put into his head by Ed is still in his mind, and he can't seem to get rid of it no matter what he does. This leads us to scene 3. Ray Mustang begins digging deeper into Lab 5, the military. We see a lot of the higher-ups acting secretively. Mustang realizes that something is being hidden on a national level. This is very much more hints to something bigger going on, some sort of government cover-up or government plot, ploy, involvement of any kind in the events of Book 4, the Lab 5. This will lead us into Scene 4. Scar strikes again. Scar resumes his attack on state alchemists. The action is fast, brutal encounters, leaves destruction behind. He feels less like a villain and more like a walking act of vengeance. Obviously, it was established why Scar is doing what he's doing, so we don't necessarily see him as a villain. He's very much just doing what, in his eyes, needs to be done and deserves to be done. This will lead us into Scene 5. Panic in the military. State alchemists are now on edge, afraid of being targeted. Scar is very much becoming a major threat to the system itself. The state alchemists are very much seen as the highest level of military power, and now even they're not safe, so even the lowest of lows, who is safe, is kind of the question. This will lead us directly into Scene 6, more on Scar's power. His arm is further explained. It destroys matter instantly. This is important because it's not traditional alchemy. It skips steps. It is very much only destruction. A lot of alchemy is, obviously it's a law of equivalent exchange, but it's very much rebuilding and repurposing. This is just destruction and conquering and devastation. That's all this is. It very much just goes straight to that and purely skips everything else. It symbolizes pure rage and loss. That is all. This will lead us to Scene 7, the arrival and introduction of Ling Yo. Probably pronouncing that wrong. Sorry again. Like I said, for these mangas with these Japanese character names, I'm American and I'm also very bad at pronouncing names already. So when you give me names like this, I'm gonna fuck them up all day. Sorry about that. I truly do my best, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I don't know what else to tell you. But it's a big introduction. Ling Yo arrives in Amistris. With him is Lin Fan and Fu. His goal is to find the secret to immortality, in layman's terms, the Philosopher's Stone. This will lead us to Scene 8. We get introduced a bit more to Ling Yo. Ling is loud, constantly hungry, weirdly friendly. In contrast, comes off comedic, but is actually extremely ambitious and calculating. He's taken advantage of you before you even possibly knew that he was even thinking of the chance of taking advantage of you. It's a very scary thing. But Ling's group introduces alchemy, differences from Amestrian alchemy, focuses on flow of energy and healing, more precise and less destructive. It expands the world beyond Amistris. This is the first time we are introduced to any sort of alchemy other than the main alchemy that is used into this world. Obviously, Scar is using specifically just destruction, but that's just more of what he's doing with it rather than the specific type of alchemy. This is a completely different type of alchemy. We weren't aware that that was a thing prior to this, and they didn't do much to hint at it prior than this, so the introduction of this was really cool. And I think it was really really pretty well done. This whole, I don't remember the writer of this. I'm going to have to go back through my notes. But the whole story throughout this is one of the best stories that's ever been written. I don't care who you are. Edward Elric is one of the best and most fleshed out characters that I've ever read about in my life. Without question. And Alphonse is pretty good too. This will lead us to scene 10. The homunculi are watching. Lust and envy are observing events. Like earlier, they are calm, in control, and always one step ahead. Everything happening may be part of a larger plan. Obviously, we're not too sure of what is going on. This will lead us to scene 11, the best scene in the book, where Barry the Chopper, my favorite, he returns, he reappears. He really doesn't do much. He kind of just adds tension and unpredictability. He connects back to Lab 5 experiments, obviously. This will lead us to scene 12, Mustang's growing suspicion. He kind of starts to connect dots from Lab 5, Scar, and the homunculi. He's realizing that the system itself may be corrupted. This leads us directly into scene 13. Ed, Al, and Ling all meet. Their goals kind of seem to align, Their dynamic turns very much into cooperation mixed with mistrust. They don't trust him. He doesn't really, he openly seems to trust them, but he doesn't trust them. That's just how it really seems to be going. Ling isn't a villain, but he's not a hero either. He's very much just kind of an interesting side character that you kind of need to keep your eyes on. Not really sure which way he's going to go yet, so. This leads us to the final scene of the book. By the end, Scar is still hunting, so not much of him. All we saw of him was very much more attacks. Hopefully, book 6 will have a better or a deeper involvement with him. Ed and Al are searching for answers still. Mustang is investigating the system. Thinks there might be a deeper level of corruption within the system. Ling is chasing immortality, the Philosopher's Stone, and the homunculi are watching everything. All storylines are moving toward collision, moving towards one center point. Volume 5 is very much a bridge from personal story to global conspiracy, from small threats to organized manipulation. And it's very much a bridge. Obviously, it's the book in between 4 and 6, but the kind of big revelations and introductions of book 4 and then the big events of book 6, it's a nice little bridge and gap to kind of lead you from one thing to another. So, and a perfect little gap. Obviously, it was written like that, and it was written perfectly for the purposes of that. And it introduces the key players and builds tension for what's going to be coming next. Obviously, this will be leading us directly into book 6, which will be the last book of this week's episode. Obviously, the bonus episode that'll be coming out. This is coming out on Friday, so coming out on Saturday will be books 7, 8, and 9. So, but let's get right into book 6. Alrighty, jumping right into book 6. Book 6 covers Scar's full backstory, continued military tension, more involvement from the homunculi, and then just the world building expands as a whole. Obviously, we get introduced to Ishval and then also the war history. But let's jump right into the book. Scene 1 opens up with Scar being hunted by the military. He's injured, but he's still very, very dangerous. The tone is very quiet, tense, survival focused. He's no longer being just attacking. He's being pushed into a corner. He's very much a caged animal at this point. This leads us directly into scene 2. By the way, before we jump too far, I know we've been introduced a bit to Scar and we've seen him a little bit. Scar is such a fucking badass. Scar is without a doubt my favorite character, other than Edward, my favorite character that they've introduced in this manga. I think, especially with his backstory and the reason why he's doing, which we get introduced to here, why he's doing what he's doing. Scar is such a fucking badass, and as far as I am, we've seen him a good deal, but I hope to see him more. I hope he becomes not necessarily a good guy or like a reoccurring character, but like I hope he's not just this beginning arc and then he's gone. Scar is really cool, and he's really scary. Like he truly does kind of put the when he comes across you in the book and he's fighting, like when he fights Edward, you truly are kind of thinking, wow, I don't know if Ed can do this. I don't know if this is going to be a good fight for Ed kind of thing. But this leads us to scene 2. Edward Elric and Alphonse Elric keep investigating the Philosopher's Stone. They are trying to find a way to restore their bodies without sacrificing lives. Obviously, we found out in Book 5, and it was hinted to us in Book 4, that the Philosopher's Stone takes human sacrifices to be created. This leads us to scene 3. Colonel Mustang moving in the shadows. Roy Mustang keeps digging. He doesn't trust the higher-ups. He begins quietly gathering allies. He's transitioning from a soldier to a strategist. Since Lab 5's, or I think it was Lab 5. It might have been Lab 7. What's the name of that lab? Lab 5. He's kind of been questioning and kind of looking into things more. He thinks the military might have a deeper connection to the events of what happened in Lab 5, or it could have been control of Lab 5. This will lead us to scene 4. Scar encounters people connected to the Ishval survivors. This is important because he's not completely alone for the first time in this story. There are still remnants of his people. This humanizes him a bit more. Obviously, from what we know so far is just where he's from and what he's doing. We don't really know his backstory. We don't know why he's doing what he's doing. We don't know anything. So for them to kind of start humanizing him here and then, the later we get into the book, them showing us his backstory, they do a really, really good job at not making you hate this character. They do a good job at making you intrigued and almost want to maybe not get behind, but you truly do understand the character and the reason he's doing what he's doing, and I think they did a really good job with that. Get behind might not be the right word, but I still don't think it necessarily makes you want to get behind him, because he's still just killing a whole bunch of people that, at least to us, aren't bad people. But this leads us into scene 5. This is quite a big shift. This is where we kind of jump into Scar's past and learn a bit about his backstory, why he's doing what he's doing, and what's caused everything. We learn about his life in Ishval before the war. His brother is a very key figure. The tone becomes very different here. It's very calm, cultural, almost peaceful, if you will. Almost, if you want to say the calm before the storm kind of situation. They're very much setting up that he had a decent life prior to the war and the events of everything that happened there, so that's a pretty good contrast. We see Ishvalan culture before the war, religious beliefs, community life. The key idea that we see throughout this is that Ishvalans reject alchemy. They value faith and tradition over anything else. This contrast matters later on into the story. It doesn't really make a whole big deal right now. This leads us into scene 7. This whole book is very, very much just a big breakdown of the character of Scar, and him being my second favorite character. I absolutely love that. So, Scar's brother studies alchemy, Ishvalan techniques. It's important he tries to combine knowledge systems. This leads to Scar's arm power later on. So it's kind of we don't find that out yet, but everything's all kind of making together, and the building blocks are going together, everything's fitting, everything's making sense here. This will lead us directly into the Ishvalan War. This is a massive turning point. Amestris military attacks Ishval. We see destruction, mass killings, and chaos. This is truly one of the darkest depictions of anything that we've seen in this manga so far. Obviously, with some other mangas, Attack on Titan and stuff of mangas of that nature, there's dark, and then even Bleach now, there's dark parts or things that get the story a bit darker, but seeing an entire military go into this place and just basically wipe out everybody is one of the darkest things I've ever seen on a comic page. So, definitely one of the darkest parts of the series. This leads us to scene 9. In the war, alchemists are used as weapons. This is kind of another reason why they get their name, the Dogs of War. That's how the people see them. That's how the community sees a lot of the alchemists. Key figures that participated in this war were Roy Mustang. The impact is very great. Entire areas are wiped out. This reframes State Alchemists into tools of genocide. Very much into tools of genocide. They've hinted throughout the story at a darker reason for State Alchemists being a thing. But until now, we didn't actually get any big or main reason for any of it until now we're getting all of it. And it's fucking crazy. They basically use these people as weapons of war to do the final bidding. It's basically their last attempt. I don't gotta tell you that this, obviously the book's getting darker and darker as everything's kind of going. As we jump into Scar's story, the story gets much, much, much more darker. This leads us to scene 10. Scar gets injured. His brother saves him by transferring his arm. The result is Scar gains destructive alchemy ability. This is the origin of his power. Obviously, he came in with the abilities. We didn't know where they came from. Now we know. Scene 11 is very much the loss of everything for Scar. Scar loses every single thing he cares about. He loses his family, his people, his home. His mission very, very quickly becomes revenge against State Alchemists. Obviously, they took everything from him. He's going to take every one of them. It's basically as simple as that. I think they did a fucking incredible job at making you not get behind the character so much as just understand. Like, you can completely understand why Scar's doing what he's doing, and you can't hate him for it or be mad at him for it because his everything was taken away from him. His everything was taken away from him, from these people that he had no power to stop at the time, but now he does have the power to stop it, so why shouldn't he? Why shouldn't he stop these people that took everything from him? They say two wrongs don't make a right, but I think in situations like this, it absolutely does. But this will lead us into scene 12, the return to the present. The flashbacks end, Scar continues moving forward. Now we understand his motives and his pain and his hatred, which I think is a very, obviously I've said was super important. It's, if you can't flesh out villains like this to make them more intriguing or more engaging, then you're not going to get somebody to want to continue to read just to come along more boring villains. Obviously there's going to be some boring villains thrown in there to kind of fill up the gap or so. That happens in a lot of stories. Like, I can think of a lot of C to D list Marvel or DC villains, but I think everyone's still relatively important in their own way. And then what they get really, really important the more you kind of can connect with these villains and understand and or just get behind their motivations or their pain or their hatred, for example. There's a lot of villains that weren't necessarily chose to be villains. It's just the way they turned out. And it's one of those things that kind of makes you question. Obviously, there's that question in real life, nature versus nurture. Does the place you grow up and the experiences you experience make you into the person you become, or does the person that raises you make you into the person you become? I truly do think it can go either way. Obviously, there's been completely normal people that have had sons or daughters or whatever that turned out to be like school shooters, serial killers, psychopaths, anything of that nature. In situations like that, it's obviously a tricky subject. Was it necessarily the nurture or the nature that did that? Was it people around them that caused that kind of thing? Was it stuff that happened to them in their life? Was it the way they were raised or brought up? It's so many of that kind of stuff affects so many things. So when they do come to a character like this and they can get you to understand and not necessarily support but not necessarily hate either at the same time, I think it's super important. Magneto's always been another character that you can do stuff like that with. You can, no matter where you are or who you are, you can understand the reason why Magneto in the main canon universe is doing what he's doing and why he hates humans, why he wants mutants to rule, why all his motivations and everything, all of them are super understandable. Obviously, we know about his backstory with the Jewish internment camp and his grandmother being killed in front of him. So, I don't know, it's always more intriguing when they can do that, and I think they did a really, really, really good job with Scar. Scene 13, Lust and Gluttony appear. They don't really do much. They monitor events and manipulate the outcomes. There are pulling strings behind everything. In scene 14, it becomes very clear that Lab 5, the war, and everything else are connected. someone is orchestrating events on a national level, and it's truly a bigger operation than they or really anyone would have ever saw coming. And scene 15 leaves us with rising tension across all the sides. By the end, Scar is still hunting, Ed and Al are searching, Mustang is investigating, and the homunculi are manipulating. All paths are starting to collide, but there's still very much a lot of things happening in this story. I think this volume is probably the second or third most important out of all of the ones that we've read so far. For one, it completely recontextualizes Scar. He's not just a one-note super bad guy that's doing whatever he's doing for whatever reason. We know the reason, we understand the reason, and we can theoretically get behind that reason. Also, this book very much shows the true horror of the world. This is where the story very much gets dark and stays getting darker. That's kind of the start of that. And then it very much expands the story from a personal thing between brothers into a large world of conspiracy and a whole bunch of crazy shit going on. So it's where FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST becomes a war story, not just a fantasy adventure about two brothers, which is obviously a big deal. When you take a story that you've been reading and then you go into a completely different direction with it, it's always going to either be a good thing or a bad thing, no matter how you look at it, and I think they did it a really good way. Like I've been saying, this is my favorite manga. These characters, I think, best written characters. Ed is one of my favorite characters I've ever written or read about. We didn't see Winry much at all, if at all, in this book, which is a little, in these three books, which is a little sad because I do love me some Winry. It's probably my second favorite character in the book, but I really enjoyed doing these three. Obviously, for the bonus episode coming out tomorrow, we are going to be doing books 7, 8, and 9. And then next week, for our manga episode, we will be doing 10, 11, and 12. And then we'll probably be taking a short break from FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST just because that's a lot of them to do in a row. But I'm really excited. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this breakdown. Obviously, it was a bit more contextualized than the last one. Obviously, with the last Bleach episode, it turned out that my notes got fucked up and I mixed the fourth episode in with the first three, so that episode ended up being a little weird, but I think this is a really, really good episode. I really, really enjoyed it, so I hope you guys do too. Well, that will be all for the breakdown of these three books and the FULLMETAL. Obviously, like I just said, bonus episode coming out tomorrow. Monday's episode, obviously a comic book episode. We are continuing on with the Ultimate Fantastic Four. That came out yesterday, but was supposed to come out last Monday. That bonus Tarzan episode is also still coming out. That will be a two-parter. The first part will be coming out, and I want to say, what day is it today? It is Friday. So it'll be coming out this coming Wednesday, hopefully. So be looking forward to that. I'm very excited for that. I worked really, really, really hard to get through that. It was over 100 hours of Tarzan movies, and of course I didn't actually watch all of them, like the ones that I've watched 100 times. The Disney ones when I was a kid, I didn't rewatch those. I just looked up the plot synopsis and kind of remembered as much as I could from them. A couple of them I wasn't able to rewatch because they just weren't available, but as much of them that I could rewatch, I did, and I enjoyed the vast majority of them. To put a little context into it, they are going to be really long episodes. When I was breaking, I think I had 4 books done, or 4 movies done, out of the, I think, 50 or 51. And that was without, or after editing it, which is taking out all the unnecessariness. It was still 50 minutes long. That's 4. Or not 50, 45 minutes long. That's 4 movies out of 50. So, given to say, it's a very long bonus episode, but I can't wait for it. Obviously, all these episodes are up on Spotify, Graphic Thoughts Podcast. We are up on YouTube still. YouTube's doing pretty good. The episodes are coming out a day and sometimes 2 days after they come up on Spotify. They're not live on Spotify like they are on, or they're not live on YouTube like they are on Spotify. But if you don't use Spotify or don't want to listen to them on Spotify, you can always go and listen to them on YouTube the following day. There will be a video up there. We are still working on, and I know I've been saying this for weeks now, editing the YouTube videos into some sort of slideshow or flip show where we can show art and panels from the comic book as we go through. I always thought that would be really cool, so I'm hoping we can do something like that. I will say it's really fucking hard. I've tried about 4 different editing softwares to do something like that, and I just can't seem to fucking figure it out. I'm not very tech savvy. I've been able to figure out how to do everything else I need to do for this, but for some reason that is just very, very complicated to me. But hopefully we'll be able to get through that. But that is going to do it for today's episode. I am your host, Dr. Panel, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Dr. Panel out.